Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the fourth book, technically, in the Lunar Chronicles series. Maybe considered the fifth book. I'm not completely sure how that works. The first book is Cinder, the second book is Scarlet, the third book is Cress, and there was a prequel novella called Fairest, which is why I'm not completely sure how numbering works in this scenario. This one just came out a couple of weeks ago in November, and I picked it up immediately and started reading it immediately because I love this series so much. I will have links to reviews of all of the other books down in the description, so you guys can check that out if you are interested in seeing my thoughts on any of the books specifically. If you haven't read any of the books of this series, I would recommend not watching this video because at this point it's really hard to talk about the books without potentially running into spoilers for the other books. But I will make sure not to spoil anything major about this book specifically, and I will actually have a spoiler section. So if you have read the book, you can check that section out and, comment on that, or if you haven't read the book yet, you can skip over that section completely. So as you guys are probably aware, each book in this series is a fairy tale retelling, and the retelling in this book is Snow White, if you couldn't tell by the wonderful apple on the cover. In this story, the main character is Princess Winter, who is basically like the Snow White character. She is beloved by everyone in her kingdom as she is considered like extremely beautiful. Everyone just like falls in love with her immediately and wants to, befriend her, be kind to her, things like that, which is obviously something that Lavanna is not a big fan of. And of course, Winter isn't really a big fan of Lavanna either because Lavanna controls her and forces her to do things that she doesn't want to be doing. So her, along with her guard, Jason, who they actually grew up together in the castle, and so they've been friends for a really long time. So together they end up actually joining forces with Cinder and the rest of the crew in trying to overthrow Lavanna. Now, one other thing that's really interesting about these stories is that yes, they're all fairy tale retellings, but there's also this underlying story going on of Cinder trying to overthrow Lavanna and trying to remove her from the throne, because as you've learned at this point, Cinder is actually the rightful heir to the throne. And one of the things I really enjoy about this series is the fact that Marissa Meyer is able to do this fairy tale retelling while also telling this other story that's happening, like this larger overarching story. Now, this book is like 800 plus pages long, and while it is young adult, so the font is a little bit bigger, this is kind of a long story because she is telling multiple narratives in here while also trying to wrap things up. So this one took me longer than the other books because there's so much happening in here, but I actually didn't mind that because Marissa Meyer puts a lot of detail and thought into preparing for this giant battle that's going to be happening towards the end of the book, and also preparing the characters, and you get to see the preparation happen. You get to see the characters try different things and fail at them and mess things up and have to start over and do all of these different things. This book is long because the characters go through a lot of trials and a lot of different scenarios, and everything doesn't always go well, and I think that is to its benefit because if it was too easy, it obviously wouldn't be very enjoyable. One of the criticisms that I've seen about this series, or at least about Cinder, is that it follows the fairy tale retelling a little bit too closely, or follows the Cinderella storyline a little too closely, to the point where it becomes kind of obvious what's happening in the book. And one of the things that I liked about this one is the fact that Snow White is a very well-known story, at least in the United States. Marissa Meyer does a really good job of taking certain elements of that story and drawing it into this. She doesn't follow Snow White's story exactly, which is really nice, but there are times where you can see her making references to certain things or having certain things happen because of how they happened in the original Snow White story. And so it brings you back to that retelling part of the book without it being just like a straight Snow White story told over again. If I have any criticism with this book, which of course I'm going to have because no book is perfect, the one that I would have is that the story feels a little bit convenient, or at least parts of it feel kind of convenient. I feel like that's necessary in almost any story, but there were certain parts of the story where I wasn't completely on board, I'll just say. That doesn't deter me at all from this book, so I still loved it. I still gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed this series. I'm just gonna say now that we're gonna go into spoilery territory, so if you don't want to know anymore, skip ahead. I'll put an annotation on the screen so you guys can skip ahead by clicking that, or just skip ahead to when you don't see me holding the book up anymore. But yeah, the entire ending I had a little bit of a difficulty with. The story is all leading up to this one giant battle scene, and one of the pros for me of the battle scene is the fact that it takes really long. It doesn't make the battle seem easy, and it doesn't make the fight seem easy, but there's the final scene where Cinder and Levana are going at it, and I don't understand it. I have a hard time in general understanding the Lunar's powers of being able to control other people, because sometimes it seems like they can do it really easily, and sometimes it seems like they have a really hard time doing it. I don't really understand how they're able to control multiple people at one time. There's a lot of like details about those things that I had a really hard time with. So the final battle where Cinder and Levana are going at it, and Levana is controlling Thorn while also controlling a couple of other people here and there, I was having a really hard time following it, and it just seemed really weird the way that she gave up or this way things ended. Like, I wasn't super crazy about the way just the final battle scene went. I will say that I do like the fact that there is consequences to everything that happens in this story. Cinder is very aware of the fact that she has killed people and that people have died and that there are going to be consequences for these actions. I will say that the final meeting that she has with the Earthen leaders was a little weird because it felt a little bit too easy. That's another situation where it felt like everything just came a little bit too easily. There is acknowledgement of the fact that relationships aren't going to be perfect right away and things aren't going to be easy right away. And even though these characters do get their happily ever after, there are still scars left behind for everything that they had to deal with, which I think was really great. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this book and this series if it all sounds interesting to you. I think it's just a really fun series. Cress is still my favorite book out of the entire thing. I think it's just because I love Cress and Thorn so much. Even in this story, Cress and Thorn were my absolute favorite characters for sure. And the final scene with them, you know, I won't spoil anything, but the final scene with them I read like multiple times because I just thought it was great. So yeah, those are my quick thoughts on this book. If you read this book, feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys thought of it. Or if you haven't read this book yet, but you've read some of the others, feel free to leave any comments or questions that you have about it down in the comment section below. I will say that if you are going to comment on anything slightly spoilery, maybe put like a little spoiler warning or something. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.